The upscale restaurant's private dining area carried the scent of expensive cuisine and wealth. My younger sister, Emma, positioned herself at the center of the lengthy table as if claiming a throne, her expression radiant beneath the soft golden illumination. She was marking what she described as her business debut, a feature in a regional magazine that she insisted would launch her career into the stratosphere. My mother, Patricia, rose to her feet, tapping her fork delicately against her champagne glass. The chatter ceased immediately. "To Emma," she announced, her voice dripping with exaggerated emotion, "to the most courageous member of our family, the only one bold enough to pursue extraordinary dreams." Applause filled the room. My hands moved automatically, clapping along with everyone else. Then the server appeared. He bypassed my mother entirely. He walked straight past my father. Instead, he came directly to me, placing a substantial leather bill folder beside my water glass. I flipped it open. $3,450. I stared at the figure. This wasn't merely a check, it was an expectation. My mother leaned close, her breath carrying the aroma of costly wine. "Your salary is steady, sweetheart," she murmured, her hand gently patting my forearm. "Help your sister out. It's really the minimum you can do." I gazed at her hand on my arm, then at the folder. Without speaking, I simply closed it, positioned my fingertips on the leather surface, and smoothly pushed it across the table until it struck the base of her wine glass with a distinct clink. Want to know what happened next? Drop a comment below, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'd really love to know who's part of this community today. You won't believe what happened when my family realized I wasn't paying this time. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening, and what I did next changed everything. Stay with me to find out how this dinner turned into the most important night of my life. The silence that descended upon the restaurant was immediate and absolute. This wasn't the comfortable quiet of a conversation pause. It was the suffocating void that follows something shocking. My mother stared at the folder now pressed against her wine glass, her expression frozen in disbelief. Emma's mouth dropped open, her eyes frantically scanning the room to see who was witnessing this moment. The guests, small-time investors, a handful of lifestyle bloggers, acquaintances of acquaintances, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes widening with curiosity. I stood up. My legs felt oddly weightless, as though they were barely connected to the ground. I looked directly at Emma, then at my mother. "I believe the business should cover its own launch expenses," I stated. My voice remained composed, controlled, yet loud enough to reach every corner of the space. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. I turned and headed toward the exit. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape and my mother's hushed, urgent whisper. "Olivia, sit back down." I kept moving forward. I walked past the hostess station, past the coat check area, and through the massive wooden doors into the frigid night air. The wind struck my face, sharp and biting, and for the first time that entire evening, I drew a complete, unrestricted breath. My fiancé, Ryan, was immediately behind me. He remained silent. He simply opened the car door, his jaw set in a firm line. We climbed in, and he turned the key in the ignition. The drive home was entirely silent. The only sounds were the hum of tires against asphalt and the rhythmic pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. I gazed out the window at the passing streetlights, anticipating the wave of guilt. I waited for the familiar surge of panic, the compulsion to apologize, the overwhelming need to repair whatever damage I had just caused. But it never arrived. Instead, there was an unusual, cold clarity. I looked at my hands resting in my lap. They weren't shaking. For years, I had been the mediator, the one who absorbed the shocks, who paid the emotional and financial price for everyone else's comfort. Tonight, I had returned the bill, and the world hadn't collapsed. The sky hadn't fallen. I was simply sitting in a car heading home with my wallet still securely closed. But here's where things get really interesting, because when we got home, I discovered something about myself that I had been denying for years. And what my family did over the next few days. That's when I realized just how deep this problem actually went. Keep watching to see how I finally took control. Ryan reached over and grasped my hand firmly. "You doing okay?" he asked softly. "I'm not sure," I replied, my voice sounding unfamiliar even to myself. "I think I just quit something." "Good," he said simply. It was overdue. We pulled into our driveway, and I looked up at the darkened windows of our home. It appeared tranquil, secure. Inside, my phone was undoubtedly already lighting up with notifications, a digital tempest gathering strength. But out here, in the stillness of the car, I experienced something I hadn't felt in 10 years. I felt like I was finally steering my own existence. I unlocked our apartment door and stepped into the quiet darkness of the living room. For years, I had persuaded myself that I was the resilient one, the problem solver, the dependable daughter who kept the family intact while everyone else fell to pieces. But standing there in the entryway, removing my coat, I understood that this was a fiction I had constructed to survive. I wasn't a martyr. I was a gambler. There's a psychological concept called the gambler's fallacy, the incorrect belief that if something happens more frequently than usual during a specific period, it will happen less frequently in the future, or the reverse. In relationships, this manifests as the conviction that if you sacrifice enough, give enough, pay enough, eventually the balance will shift. Eventually, they'll recognize your value. Eventually, they'll reciprocate. But that's not how emotional economics actually work. The house always wins. And I had been feeding quarters into a slot machine programmed never to pay out, convincing myself that the next pull would be the jackpot. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself water, my hands finally beginning to tremble, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Ryan appeared beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "How long have you known?" I asked him. "That they were using you?" "Since the beginning," he admitted. "But you weren't ready to hear it. You needed to see it yourself." I nodded slowly, letting that truth settle over me. My phone, still in my purse by the door, began vibrating insistently. I didn't move to check it. For once, their emergency wasn't mine to resolve. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying years of moments I had dismissed or rationalized. Every emergency that became my responsibility. Every celebration I had funded but never truly attended. Every apology I had made for setting even the smallest boundary. And you know what I realized? Tomorrow morning, I was going to face the consequences of tonight's decision. My phone was already exploding with messages, and what they said made me understand something terrifying and liberating at the same time. Stay tuned to discover what my family really thought of me and what I did about it. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon. I woke up to 73 text messages. I didn't read them, not immediately. Instead, I made coffee, toasted bread, and sat at our small kitchen table with Ryan across from me, his expression supportive but concerned. "You should probably look at those," he suggested gently. I picked up my phone. The messages formed a predictable pattern. Emma, dramatic and accusatory. My father, David, angry and demanding. My mother, manipulative, cycling between guilt and victimhood. But one message stood out. It was from my mother, sent at 3 a.m. "You've always been selfish. Even as a child. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Your sister is devastated. I hope you're proud of yourself." I read it twice. Then I read it again. Something inside me, some last fragile thread of obligation, finally snapped. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I titled it The Ghost Ledger. Then I began documenting every payment, every loan that was never repaid, every bill I had covered with a promise of "I'll pay you back next month" that never materialized. Emma's rent when she was building her brand in 2020, $8,400. Dad's lawyer fees after his DUI, $5,200. Mom's wellness retreats that were essential for her mental health, $3,800. The family phone plan I had been covering since I was 22, for $1,320 over 5 years. Streaming services, emergency car repairs, medical bills, credit card payments to just get through this rough patch. The list grew longer and longer. When I finished, the total made me physically nauseous. $42,350. That was a down payment on a house. That was a wedding. That was my future, liquidated to subsidize their present. I saved the file and closed the laptop. Ryan, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. What are you going to do with that?
I'm going to show them, I said.
Not because I want the money back, but because I need them to see what they've been doing. I need them to understand that I'm not an ATM. I'm a human being. They won't see it that way, Ryan warned. I know, I replied, but I need to do this anyway. For me. I typed out a message to the family group chat. Family meeting. My apartment. Saturday at 2 p.m. Non-negotiable. The responses came immediately. Confusion. Anger. Demands for explanation. I silenced my phone and didn't respond. Because Saturday wasn't about negotiation. It was about closure. And what I had planned for that meeting would either free me or destroy what was left of my family forever. What happened at that confrontation? The truth I revealed shocked them into silence, and their reaction proved everything I had suspected. Don't miss the next part. It gets intense. Saturday arrived cold and gray. I spent the morning preparing my apartment, not for guests, but for battle. I printed multiple copies of the ghost ledger. I gathered bank statements, receipts, text message screenshots, anything that documented the pattern. Ryan offered to stay, but I declined. This is something I need to face alone, I told him. They arrived exactly on time, all three of them. Emma looked defiant, arms crossed. My father appeared irritated, as though I had pulled him away from something important. My mother wore her martyred expression, the one that usually made me cave immediately. This better be important, my father began. We're very busy. Sit down, I interrupted, my voice level but firm. Something in my tone made them comply. They sat on my second-hand couch, suddenly looking smaller than I remembered. I placed the first set of papers on the coffee table in front of them. Before we begin, I said, I want to acknowledge something. I participated in this dynamic. I enabled it. I'm not blameless. My mother's face softened slightly, sensing an opening for reconciliation. However, I continued. That ends today. What you're looking at is a comprehensive audit of my financial contributions to this family over the past 5 years. Emma picked up her copy, her eyes scanning the columns. Her face went pale. This is invasive, my father objected. Our private family matters are funded by my private bank account, I finished. So, yes, they're very much my business. I walked them through it, line by line. Every payment, every broken promise, every time they had treated my resources as their entitlement. The total, I said, pointing to the final page, is $42,350. That's not including emotional labor, time off work to handle your emergencies, or opportunities one passed up because I was financially drained. The room fell silent. We're family, my mother finally said, her voice trembling. Family helps each other. You're right, I agreed. Family does help each other. But help is reciprocal. What you've been doing isn't help. It's extraction. Emma stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You make good money as a teacher. You can afford. I can afford my own life. I cut her off. What I can't afford is 3 additional lives that refuse to support themselves. My father's face turned red. We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, gave you everything. You fulfilled your legal obligation as parents. I responded calmly. That doesn't entitle you to treat me as your personal credit line for the rest of my existence. I took a deep breath. I'm not asking for the money back, but I am closing the account. Effective immediately, I am no longer your financial backup plan. The explosion that followed was inevitable. What they said next revealed their true colors, and my response. It was the most powerful moment of my entire life. Stay with me to hear how this ended. Emma's voice reached a pitch I'd never heard before. You're being incredibly selfish. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuinely curious. Name one thing in the past 5 years where you sacrificed something meaningful for my benefit. Silence. That's what I thought. I continued. This relationship has been unidirectional, and I'm redirecting the flow. My father stood up, towering over me, an intimidation tactic he'd used my entire life. You're ungrateful, and you're destroying this family. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I stood up too, meeting his gaze directly. I'm not destroying anything that was actually built on solid ground, I said quietly. If our relationship can only survive as long as I'm writing checks, then it wasn't a real relationship. It was a transaction. My mother began crying, those calculated tears I had seen thousands of times. How can you be so cruel? Your own mother. Stop, I said firmly. Those tears don't work anymore. I see them for what they are. Manipulation. She gasped, genuinely shocked that her usual tactic had failed. I pulled out another document, the restaurant reservation confirmation. This, I said, is a receipt for the anniversary party you told me was canceled due to financial hardship. The same week you asked me to cover Emma's business dinner. The party is booked for next month at Tuscany. Cost, $6,800. Charged to my credit card without my permission. The color drained from my mother's face completely. My father shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by the floor pattern. Emma stopped her theatrical crying and looked at our parents, confused. You said you weren't having a party. You told me you couldn't afford it. We didn't want to burden her, my mother stammered, her eyes darting between me and Emma. We knew you were stressed about money, Olivia. We didn't want you to feel obligated to buy a gift. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Obligated. You didn't want me to feel obligated, so you just used my credit card to book the venue behind my back. I laid out the final document, the complete ghost ledger, 5 pages of single-spaced entries. This, I said, fanning the pages across the table, is an itemized list of every single expense, every broken promise, every exploitation. I looked at my father. You called me selfish. You said I was ruining the family dynamic. I tapped the total at the bottom of the last page. $42,350. That's what I've invested in this family. That's a down payment on a house. That's a wedding. That's my entire future liquidated to subsidize your lifestyles. And then I said the words that changed everything. What came next was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. Keep watching. This is where everything shifts. My father's face flushed deep red. We raised you. You owe us. I don't owe you anything. The volume of my voice didn't increase, but the intensity cut through his bluster like a blade. I realized something tonight. I'm not your daughter. I never was. I'm your venture capitalist. I'm the silent partner you approach when you need a bailout, but you don't want to surrender any equity or control. I stood up, towering over them as they sat on my second-hand furniture that I had purchased myself, with my own money that hadn't been siphoned away. And I've decided, I continued, that this is a terrible investment. The returns are non-existent, the partners are hostile, and the business model is unsustainable. I'm pulling my funding. I pointed toward the door. Leave. Olivia, my mother pleaded, standing and reaching for my hand. Let's just discuss this rationally. We can establish a payment plan. We can work this out. I pulled my hand back sharply. There is no payment plan. The account is closed. There will be no more deposits. There will be no more loans. There will be no more emergencies that become my financial responsibility. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out of my home. Leave your spare key on the table. If you attempt to use it again, I'll change the locks. If you harass me, I'll take this documentation to small claims court and let a judge determine whether your actions constitute financial elder abuse. Except I'm not elderly, I'm just exploited. I met each of their eyes in turn. I am done purchasing your affection. I am done buying my place in this family. I am done being your aide. They looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment they understood. The bank was closed. The loans were finished. The cash machine was out of service permanently. Slowly, silently, my father stood. He placed his key on the coffee table next to the evidence of their exploitation. He didn't look back. My mother lingered, one last attempt at negotiation forming on her lips. But something in my expression stopped her. She set down her key too. Then Emma, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, dropped hers with a metallic clink. They filed out one by one, the door clicking shut behind them with a finality that resonated in my bones. I stood there in the sudden silence of my apartment, and for the first time in a decade, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. But this story doesn't end here. What happened in the 3 months that followed taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Stay tuned for the powerful conclusion that will change how you think about family obligations forever. 3 months have passed since what I now call the audit. My phone sits on the coffee table, screen dark and silent. For years, that silence would have terrified me. It would have felt like punishment, like the ominous quiet before a storm of guilt trips and demands.
But now?
The silence feels different. It feels like a receipt for a debt fully paid. It feels like peace. I opened my banking app this morning. The numbers were higher than I'd ever seen them. The monthly drain, the phone bills, the streaming services, the emergency loans that never returned, had stopped. The $42,000 I would have bled out over the next 5 years is staying right here, in my accounts, funding my actual life. I turned to Ryan, who was making coffee in our kitchen.
Book it, I said.
He looked up, confused but hopeful. Book what? The honeymoon. But we're not going to Italy. We're not going where my mother wanted to stage her fantasy of the perfect family photograph. We're going to Tokyo, because that's where I want to go. For the first time in my life, my resources are funding my own dreams, not someone else's delusions. I sat down at my desk and opened the laptop one final time. I looked at the spreadsheet, the ghost ledger. It was no longer a source of anger or resentment. It was simply data, historical records of a failed business venture. I moved the file to the archive folder and clicked close. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I looked tired, yes, but I also looked free. I realized then that the cost of my freedom was high. I lost a mother, a father, and a sister. I lost the illusion of a safety net, the fantasy that they would someday recognize my worth and reciprocate. But looking around my quiet, peaceful living room, knowing that no one was coming to disturb my sanctuary, knowing that my financial decisions were now mine alone, I understood something profound. The price of staying would have been infinitely higher. The account is closed. The balance is zero. And I am finally, truly in the black.